It was Lisa's 42nd birthday, and I'd been up since 6 in the morning baking her favorite red velvet cake from scratch. I even used that expensive organic cocoa she liked, the one that cost almost $15 a bag. I packed the cake carefully, wrapped her gifts, and drove across Dallas with a smile on my face, humming along to old country tunes. My baby girl was turning 42, and even though she had her own house, her own husband, and twin boys, she'd always be my little girl. I expected hugs, laughter, maybe a family lunch like we used to have. Instead, that day turned into the one I'd remember for the rest of my life, the day my daughter called me toxic. When I rang her doorbell, I heard footsteps inside, then her voice, sharp, impatient. "Who is it?" she called. "It's me, honey," I said. "Your mom." She opened the door halfway, still holding her phone, not even looking up from the screen. "Oh, hi, Mom," she muttered. "I didn't know you were coming." I laughed softly, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, it's your birthday, sweetheart. You think I'd forget that?" I lifted the cake box like a trophy. "Red velvet, just how you like it." She sighed, that long exhale people do when they're already annoyed. "Mom, we need to talk." Those 4 words never lead to anything good. I stepped inside, pretending not to notice her tight expression. The house smelled like expensive candles and baby shampoo. The twins' toys were scattered across the living room, but the place looked cold somehow, like a hotel. I set the cake on the counter and waited for her to speak. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Lisa began, arms folded, nails perfectly manicured. "About boundaries, about space. I've been talking to my therapist, and she says some of my stress comes from you always being around." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "Around," I said. "Lisa, I hardly see you anymore unless you need me to babysit or lend you money." She rolled her eyes. "Exactly, Mom. That's the problem. You're too available. I feel guilty all the time, like you're waiting for me to need you. It's kinda toxic." I blinked. Toxic. The word hit me like a slap. "Sweetheart, please don't get dramatic," she interrupted. "This isn't about you being a bad person. It's about me needing peace. I need space from all the emotional stuff. The constant texts, the drop-ins, the guilt trips." I felt my throat closing up. "Lisa, I text you good morning and good night. That's not a guilt trip, that's love." She shook her head. "You see. You don't get it. I'm 42, Mom. I need you to stop treating me like I'm 12. I wanted to say 1,000 things, but none of them came out right. I'd worked 2 jobs most of my life so that girl could go to college debt-free. I'd sold my wedding ring to help her with her down payment. I'd missed vacations, skipped doctor appointments, pawned jewelry, all for her. And now she was calling me toxic because I loved her too much. She poured herself a glass of sparkling water and leaned against the counter. "Look, Mom," she said, calmer now. "I don't want a big fight on my birthday. I just need a little break. Maybe don't call every day. Maybe don't just show up. And maybe focus on your own life for once." I nodded slowly, even though my chest felt hollow. "If that's what you want." She looked relieved, like she'd just finished a chore. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't move. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I whispered, and I walked out with that red velvet cake still in my hands. In the car, I sat for a long time staring at the box. The frosting had smudged against the lid. I thought about the years I'd spent making that exact cake, when she was 10, and she'd clap her little hands covered in flour, when she was 16 and wanted to celebrate with her friends but still asked me to bake it. Now, it was just an unwanted gesture from a mother who didn't know when to quit. That night I couldn't eat. I left the cake on my kitchen counter until the frosting crusted over. I scrolled through old photos, Lisa in her prom dress, Lisa holding her newborns, Lisa smiling at me across the dinner table. I wondered when exactly she'd stopped seeing me as Mom and started seeing me as some kind of burden. The next morning, I called my sister Denise. She lives out in Oklahoma, never had kids, always said I spoiled mine rotten. When she heard my voice, she said, "You sound like hell, Marth. What happened?" I told her everything, from the door to the word toxic. Denise whistled low. "Well, damn. That's cold." "She says I smother her," I said. "After all I've done." "Yeah, I know. But you kinda did everything for her, didn't you?" she said gently. "You built her a life so easy she forgot how to appreciate it." I didn't want to admit it, but she was right. The next few days, Lisa didn't call. Usually she'd text something like, "Can you pick up the boys from soccer?" Or "Can you send a little extra this month?" But there was nothing. I tried not to reach out. I told myself I was respecting her space. Still, by the fourth day, the silence hurt more than any insult. I finally texted, "Just checking in. Love you." No response. A week later, I ran into her husband, Mark, at the grocery store. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like a kid caught doing something wrong. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Guess Lisa told you I'm toxic now," I said before I could stop myself. His eyes widened. "She said that? Wow. I'm sorry. She's just been stressed. You know how she gets." "Apparently I'm the reason she's stressed," I muttered. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way." But she did. Every time I replayed her tone, that flat, therapist-approved delivery, I knew she'd meant every word. That night, I sat with my checkbook, staring at the monthly transfer I made to Lisa's account, $500 to help with the kids' stuff. I'd been doing it for years. I'd also co-signed their mortgage, covered their health insurance premiums a few times, and given them my old car. I realized I'd spent nearly half my retirement savings keeping their world spinning. For the first time, I asked myself what I was getting in return. The answer was nothing but guilt. The next day, I went down to the bank. The teller, a young man with tattoos, smiled politely. "Morning, Ms. Carter. What can I do for you?" I hesitated, then said, "I need to close a joint emergency account I share with my daughter." He tapped a few keys. "You sure? It's got a decent balance." "I'm sure." He nodded. "All right then, let's move it over." Watching him transfer that money back into my own account felt strange. Part relief, part grief. It was like reclaiming a piece of myself I didn't know I'd given away. That afternoon, Lisa finally called. My heart jumped at her name on the screen. Maybe she missed me. Maybe she realized she'd been too harsh. "Hey, Mom," she said, voice casual. "Listen, the boys have a recital Friday night and Mark's got a work dinner. Can you watch them?" My stomach twisted. "I can't," I said quietly. "I've got plans." She laughed. "Since when do you have plans?" "Since now." There was silence on the line. "Mom, don't be like that." "Like what?" I said. "Like someone with her own life?" She sighed. "God, you're so sensitive." "Fine, I'll find someone else." She hung up, and I stared at the phone, realizing she hadn't called because she missed me. She called because she needed something. Later that week, I met my neighbor Joe while checking the mail. He's a widower in his 70s, kind man with a slow drawl. "You okay, Martha?" he asked. "You look like you've been Che-Win on lemons." I smiled weakly. "Family stuff." He nodded. "Ain't it always?" Then he said something that stuck with me. "Sometimes you gotta stop pouring from your cup if no one's refilling it." That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, thinking about that cup. Mine had been empty for years, and I hadn't even noticed. The next morning, I started making lists. Things I'd always wanted to do but never had the time, or the nerve, to try. Learn to paint. Take a road trip alone. Maybe visit the ocean again. My husband, God rest his soul, used to say I'd end up dying in this house, waiting on someone else's call. I laughed out loud remembering that. Maybe it was time to prove him wrong. Still, a part of me wanted closure with Lisa before I changed anything. So I drove to her place one last time. She answered the door looking tired, her hair in a messy bun, a toddler clinging to her leg. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I told you." "Relax," I said, holding up my hands. "I'm not here to argue. I just came to drop off something." I handed her an envelope with receipts, notes, and a short letter. "What's this?" she asked. "Just something I needed to get off my chest," I said. "You can read it later." She looked suspicious but took it. I smiled softly. "I love you, Lisa. Always will. But I'm done being your safety net." Then I turned and walked away before she could respond. In the car, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time since my husband's passing, I wasn't rushing home to anyone, wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I was just me. Martha Carter. A 70-year-old woman with a half-tank of gas, a little cash, and no idea where the hell life might take her next. But for the first time, that sounded exciting instead of terrifying. As I drove back toward the highway, the Dallas skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. I rolled down the window and let the wind hit my face. I didn't know it then, but that was the first day of the rest of my life. The day I stopped begging for love and started giving it to myself. 2 days after I dropped that envelope at Lisa's door, the silence started again, but this time it didn't sting as much. I spent the morning watering my little backyard garden and realized how quiet the world sounded when nobody was demanding something from you. The sky was bright, the air smelled like cut grass, and for the first time in years, I wasn't checking my phone every 10 minutes. Around noon the phone finally buzzed. It was Lisa. I let it ring 3 times before answering. She didn't even say hello. "Mom, what the hell is this letter?" she snapped. "You're acting crazy." I took a deep breath. "It's the truth, sweetheart. Everything I've paid for, every time I bailed you out. I needed to write it down so I'd finally see what it cost me." She huffed. "You didn't have to keep score." "I didn't," I said calmly. "But when someone calls you toxic, it makes you wonder what your love's really worth." She was quiet for a second, then muttered, "You sound ridiculous." I said softly, "Maybe. But I'm done living ridiculous." She hung up without another word. I sat there staring at the phone, waiting for the ache to return, but it didn't. There was a dull peace settling in, like my heart finally realized the war was over. That night, I took out an old map from the junk drawer. The paper smelled like dust and coffee. I circled towns I'd driven through years ago but never stopped to explore. Galveston, Santa Fe, maybe even Nashville. Why not? I was 70, not dead. I still had my driver's license, a half-decent pension, and a curiosity I'd buried for decades under motherhood and bills. The next morning I cleaned the house top to bottom, stuffed old clothes in trash bags, and packed a single suitcase. My neighbor Joe saw me loading the trunk. "You going somewhere, Martha?" he asked. "Not sure yet," I said with a grin. "But somewhere with good pie and salt air." He laughed. "Well, send a postcard." I hit the road with the windows down, country music blasting, and that sweet mix of fear and freedom buzzing in my chest. I stopped in small towns along the way, ate pecan pie at roadside diners, chatted with strangers who didn't know a thing about me. For once, I wasn't someone's mom, widow, or helper. I was just a woman with a story and a tank of gas. 3 days later, I ended up in a little coastal town in Florida called Cedar Harbor. The streets were lined with palm trees, the air smelled like seaweed and sunscreen, and the locals waved like they'd known me forever. I found a motel across from the marina. Faded blue shutters, sand in the hallways, cheap but clean. The owner, an older lady named Patty, handed me a key and said, "Stay as long as you need, honey. Folks come here to heal." I smiled. Guess I'm in the right place then. That evening, I walked barefoot on the beach, watching the sunset smear orange across the water. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent cooking for other people, all the nights I'd gone to bed exhausted but proud because my daughter was happy. I traded every piece of myself for her comfort, and she'd called it suffocating. Maybe she wasn't wrong, but she also wasn't right. I'd given because giving was the only way I knew how to love. Now I needed to learn a different kind of love. The next morning, I found a small cafe on the corner called Sandy's Place. The coffee tasted like burnt heaven, and the waitress, a red-haired woman with a tattoo that said wild and wise, grinned when I told her I'd just rolled into town. "Welcome to the misfit capital of Florida," she said. "Everyone here's run away from something." I laughed. Then I'm in good company. She introduced me to a few regulars, Bill, who painted seashells for tourists, and Carol, who'd been divorced 3 times and said she was finally having fun. They told stories, argued about fishing, and treated me like I'd been part of their morning crowd forever. When I left, Sandy handed me a flyer for an art class at the community center. "You look like you got a painter's soul," she said. I'd never painted a thing in my life, but I stuck the flyer in my purse anyway. Later that afternoon, I called my bank from a payphone outside the cafe, just to make sure my money transfers were secure. The clerk confirmed everything was fine, and I felt a strange thrill knowing Lisa couldn't touch a cent of it. I'd even cancelled her access to the emergency card she'd used, just in case. That card had been charged more times than I could count. Not anymore. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since my husband passed. I wrote about Lisa, about the word toxic, about how it still echoed sometimes but softer now. I wrote about Joe's advice and the way the ocean smelled like forgiveness. And somewhere between the pages, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. And ready. A week went by, then 2. I started taking those art classes, painting clumsy sunsets and crooked boats, and laughing when the paint ran. I joined a group of retirees who went walking every morning at sunrise. One of them, a woman named Nora, told me, "You know what, honey? We spend our first 50 years trying to be needed and the rest trying to be free." That line stuck in my head. One evening, I sat on a bench by the pier, sketching the horizon, when my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Lisa. "Where are you? I need to talk." I stared at it for a long time before typing back, "I'm fine. Please respect my space the way you asked me to." I hit send and turned the phone off. The waves kept rolling in, like the universe clapping for me. A few days later, Mark called. His voice was tight. "Martha, can we talk? Lisa's losing it. She says you closed the accounts." "I did," I said. "She told me to focus on my own life, so that's what I'm doing." He sighed. "She didn't mean it like that." "How else would she mean it, Mark?" I said. "She made herself pretty clear. We're struggling, okay? My hours got cut, and she's panicking about bills." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "But I'm done being your financial safety net." There was silence, then a quiet, "I understand." When I hung up, I felt both guilty and proud. I'd spent decades fixing problems that weren't mine. Now, they'd have to figure it out themselves. By the 3rd week in Cedar Harbor, I was practically a local. Patty offered me a discount on the motel room, and Sandy hinted that she needed help baking pies in the mornings. I said yes. It felt good to wake up early, smell cinnamon and sugar, and know my effort earned me something that was mine alone. I'd come home covered in flour, hair a mess, humming old songs. People smiled at me, not because I was useful to them, but because they liked me. One night after closing the cafe, Sandy poured us both a drink and said, "So what's your story, sweetheart? Nobody ends up here by accident." I told her everything. The birthday, the word toxic, the drive. She whistled low. "Girl, that's rough. But damn, you're strong for getting out before it killed your spirit." I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't feel strong. I just felt empty. "Sometimes empty's the best place to start," she said. "Means you got room to fill up with better things." That night, I dreamed of my husband again. He was sitting on the porch, smiling that crooked smile. "You finally did it, Mart," he said in my dream. You finally put yourself first. I woke up crying and laughing at the same time. The next morning, while pouring coffee at the cafe, Paddy burst in holding her phone. Martha, honey, you're famous, she said. Some local blogger wrote about you. My stomach dropped. What? Yeah. That lady from the art class posted about your story. How you moved here to start over after your daughter called you toxic. People are saying it's inspiring. She showed me the post, a picture of my painting, a short paragraph about second chances. Hundreds of comments. I felt my cheeks flush, but a tiny spark of pride warmed my chest. Later that day, Lisa called again. I didn't answer. Then came a text. Mom, please. We need to talk. Mark lost his job again. We're drowning. The boys miss you. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering. Part of me wanted to help. Old habits die hard, but I remembered that empty cup. I typed, I love those boys, but this is something you and Mark have to handle. I'm okay, and I hope you will be too. I pressed send, then put the phone face down. That night, the tide came in high, waves crashing louder than usual. I sat on the sand until the moon rose, thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The guilt still whispered sometimes, but the peace was louder. I realized I didn't need revenge. Just distance. A few days later, I got a letter from my bank back home confirming the sale of a small rental property I'd co-owned with Lisa and Mark. Turns out, since they'd defaulted on payments, my portion reverted to me. The check inside was bigger than anything I'd seen in years. I laughed out loud, right there on my motel bed. Life had a funny way of paying you back once you stopped giving yourself away. I deposited the check and opened a new account in my name only. No co-signers, no dependents. Just Martha Carter, free woman. That weekend, the cafe crew threw me a little celebration. Nothing fancy, just pie, laughter, and a cheap bottle of champagne. Sandy raised her glass and said, "To Martha, the queen of second chances." Everyone clapped, and I swear I felt 20 years younger. After they all left, I walked back to my motel under the streetlights, humming to myself. The ocean breeze smelled like salt and hope. My phone buzzed one last time before midnight. It was a picture from Lisa, the twins holding a sign that said, "We love you, Grandma." My throat tightened. Under it, she'd written, "I'm sorry. Mean returning to the same pain." I whispered to the dark, "I love you too, baby girl. But I'm done saving you." Then I turned off the phone and watched the stars over Cedar Harbor until I fell asleep in the sand. 2 months passed in Cedar Harbor, and the town started to feel like home. I'd wake up early, walk to Sandy's cafe before sunrise, and open the doors while the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls filled the air. Tourists came and went, but the locals stayed, and they treated me like family. I'd laugh with Bill about his seashell paintings, listen to Carol complain about her exes, and swap stories with Sandy about the good old days when gas was cheap and people actually called instead of texting. For the first time in decades, my days felt mine. Still, every now and then, the past would sneak up on me. Sometimes I'd see a mother and daughter walking down the pier hand in hand and feel that little sting in my chest. I'd remind myself that missing someone doesn't mean you have to invite them back into your life. It just means you're human. One evening, I was closing up the cafe when Sandy came out from the kitchen with 2 slices of key lime pie. "You look like you need sugar," she said, handing me a plate. "You've been quiet all day." I smiled. "Just thinking." "About your daughter?" I nodded. "Do you ever stop missing the people who hurt you?" She thought about it. "No. But you stop needing their approval. Big difference." I stared at my fork, thinking about how long I'd lived on Lisa's approval. Every good grade she brought home, every compliment from her friends, every Mother's Day card that said I was the best mom in the world, it was like oxygen to me. I never realized how much of my worth depended on her until she took it away. That night, I sat on the porch of my motel room with the ocean humming in the background and decided to do something bold. I pulled out my old laptop and started writing, not to Lisa, but to myself. I wrote about the years of sacrifice, the endless giving, the way motherhood had turned me into a ghost of my own life. I didn't know what I'd do with the words, but it felt good to pour them out. It was like wringing poison from a wound. By the end of the week, I had 20 pages of memories, reflections, and little lessons I'd learned since arriving in Cedar Harbor. I showed a few pages to Sandy, and she whistled. "Girl, you got something here. You should share this online. People need to hear it. Who'd care about the ramblings of a 70-year-old woman?" I laughed. "More people than you think," she said. "Half the women who come in here are living the same story, just too scared to tell it." So one evening, I gathered my courage and posted the first few pages on a community blog called Voices of the Coast. I signed it simply, "A Mother Learning to Live Again." I didn't expect much, but by morning there were dozens of comments. Women from all over the country had written things like, "You just told my story, and I thought I was the only one who felt this way." One message hit me hardest. "Thank you. My daughter cut me out of her life last year, and I thought it was all my fault. Your words helped me breathe again." I cried reading that. Maybe my pain wasn't wasted after all. A week later, a journalist from a small online magazine emailed me asking if they could republish my story. I hesitated, but Sandy said, "Do it. Let your truth be louder than your guilt." So I agreed. They titled it "When Love Hurts: One Mother's Story of Letting Go." Within days, it spread like wildfire. My inbox filled with messages from mothers, daughters, even sons, all sharing stories of broken families and second chances. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was Lisa. My stomach clenched, but I answered. Her voice was soft this time, shaky even. "Mom, I saw the article. A friend sent it to me." I held my breath. "I didn't write it to shame you," I said carefully. "I changed all the names." "I know," she whispered. But I recognized it anyway. There was silence, just the sound of the ocean through the open window. "Finally," she said, "you made me look at myself. I've been awful to you." My heart jumped. "Lisa, I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time in years, she actually sounded like the girl I raised. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." I swallowed hard. "I forgive you, sweetheart," I said. "But I'm not coming back to the way things were." "I know," she said quietly. "I just wanted to hear your voice." When the call ended, I sat staring at the phone, tears running down my face. For the first time, her words didn't feel like manipulation. They felt real. But I also knew better than to fall back into old patterns. Forgiveness didn't mean surrender. The next morning, Paddy told me someone had dropped off a package for me at the front desk. Inside was a small photo frame with a picture of me holding Lisa as a baby, both of us laughing. There was a note, "For all the love you gave me when I didn't deserve it. Love. Lisa." I smiled through my tears and set it by my bedside. Maybe people really can change, but only after you stop letting them drain you. Life in Cedar Harbor went on. The cafe got busier. I started painting real commissions, little ocean scenes tourists bought for $20 a pop. My laugh came easier. My sleep was deep. But then came a letter that knocked the wind out of me. It was from a lawyer back in Dallas. Apparently, Lisa and Mark were facing foreclosure on their house. Since my name was still listed as a co-signer on part of the mortgage, the bank wanted to confirm my intent. The lawyer wrote, "You have legal right to claim your portion or release your liability. Please respond within 30 days. I sat staring at the letter, the words blurring together. I'd told Lisa I forgave her, but this was money. My money. Part of me wanted to just sign away the claim and wash my hands of it. But another part of me, the part that had worked double shifts for 40 years, said, "No, you earned that." That night, I called Joe back in Dallas. "You think it's wrong to take what's legally mine?" I asked. He chuckled. "Hell no. You ain't talking nothin'. You're just collectin' what's owed." So I contacted the lawyer and reclaimed my half. The bank processed it, and a month later a check arrived, enough to make me secure for the rest of my life. When I deposited it, I whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. A week after that, Lisa called again, her voice frantic. "Mom, the bank says they're moving forward with foreclosure. You can't let them take the house." "I didn't take anything that wasn't mine," I said calmly. "You stopped paying. That's the consequence." She started crying. "The boys need a home." "Then find one you can afford," I said gently. "I told you, I'm not your safety net anymore." She sobbed harder. "I can't believe you do this to us." "Lisa," I said, steady now, "I didn't do this to you. You did this when you decided my love was toxic." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but not from guilt, from power. Not revenge, not hate, just power. The kind that comes when you finally stop begging for permission to exist. Over the next few weeks, I heard through a mutual friend that Lisa and Mark moved into a small apartment. The twins started at a new school. They were fine. Kids are resilient. Lisa picked up more shifts at the clinic where she worked. It wasn't the end of the world. It was just life finally balancing itself out. One evening, I got an email from a book editor in New York. She'd read my online story and wanted to know if I'd consider expanding it into a book about mothers reclaiming their independence. I almost dropped my coffee. Me, a writer? But she insisted. "Your voice is real," she wrote. "It's what people need." So I started writing every night after work, turning my journal into chapters. I wrote about love, sacrifice, boundaries, and the art of walking away. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And maybe honesty was the only thing that had ever truly been mine. A month later, I signed my first publishing contract. I was 71 years old and starting a brand new career. When the advance hit my account, I didn't buy anything fancy. I donated part to a local women's shelter, the kind of place I wish I'd known existed when I was younger and stuck in cycles of giving too much. The night I sent the final manuscript, I walked down to the water and stood there barefoot, the waves licking at my toes. I thought about Lisa, about the woman I used to be, about the pain that had somehow turned into purpose. The ocean shimmered under the moonlight, and I whispered, "Thank you." Because in losing my daughter's approval, I'd found my own. The book came out in late spring under the title Learning to Breathe Again. The cover showed a single seashell resting on the sand, and when I first held it in my hands, I cried so hard I almost smudged the ink on the dedication page. It said, "For every mother who forgot herself while loving too hard." The publisher mailed me 10 copies. I lined them up on my motel dresser like trophies. I couldn't believe those words were mine. The local paper did a small story about the beach baker who became a best-selling author, and people I didn't even know started dropping by the cafe just to say thank you. Every week the emails poured in. Women from Ohio, California, the Carolinas, they all said the same thing. "Your story helped me walk away from my grown kids' drama." Some even sent pictures of themselves on road trips or at painting classes, smiling like they just remembered who they were. Reading those messages felt like oxygen. For the first time, I knew my pain had a purpose bigger than me. Sandy started teasing me, calling me celebrity chef. I'd roll my eyes and tell her I still burned the biscuits half the time. But she'd grin and say, "Doesn't matter, honey. You're feeding souls now." One afternoon the phone rang at the cafe. Sandy handed it to me with a smirk. "Call for the famous author." I answered, expecting another reporter, but the voice on the line froze me. "Hi, Mom." Lisa sounded nervous, small. "I saw the book," she said. "I read it cover to cover." My throat tightened. "You did?" "Yeah. It hurt," she admitted. "But it also made me proud." I didn't know what to say. Finally I whispered, "That means more than you think." She hesitated. "We moved into a rental. It's tiny but nice. The boys are good. They ask about you all the time." I smiled. "I think about them every day. Then she said softly, "Do you think maybe we could visit sometime?" I stared out the cafe window at the waves curling under the sun. "Maybe one day," I said. "Let's give it a little time." "Okay," she said. "I understand." Before hanging up she added, "I really am sorry, Mom." I believed her, but I also knew that apology didn't erase the years I'd lost. It just meant maybe we both learned something. A few weeks later my publisher invited me to New York for an interview. I'd never flown alone before, but Sandy and Patty practically pushed me onto the plane. "Go show 'em what Texas ladies are made of," Sandy said. The city felt like another planet, loud, fast, bright, but when the camera lights came on and the interviewer asked, "What made you write this book?" I smiled and said, "A birthday cake and a word I'll never forget." The audience laughed softly, and I told the truth. How being called toxic forced me to detox my own life, how love without respect is just a slow death. When I finished, people stood up and clapped. I didn't even notice the tears running down my cheeks until the host handed me a tissue. After the interview, my phone exploded with messages. Some were from strangers, others from old friends back in Dallas. Even my sister Denise texted, "Proud of you, sis. Knew you had fire left in you." That night in the hotel room I sat by the window overlooking the skyline and thought, if I'd stayed quiet, none of this would have happened. When I got back to Cedar Harbor, the town threw a little party at the cafe. Balloons, banners, the works. They played country music, and Sandy danced with a broom while Bill painted my portrait on a seashell. I laughed until my stomach hurt. Later, when everyone went home, I walked to the beach with a slice of pie and watched the moonlight shimmer across the water. I realized I'd built a new family here, not by blood, but by choice. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, I got another call. It was Mark. His voice was heavy. "Martha, I don't want to intrude, but Lisa's not doing great. She's been working double shifts, stressed out. She misses you." I sighed. "I miss her too, Mark, but I can't go back to being her crutch." "She's not asking for money," he said quickly. She's scared she lost you for good." I stayed silent for a long time. "Tell her I'm okay," I said finally. "Tell her she still has a mother who loves her, but one who's living her own life now." After I hung up, I drove out to the edge of town where the sea met the marshes. The wind whipped my hair, and gulls circled above. I thought about how strange it was that distance could teach more than lectures ever could. Lisa was learning responsibility. I was learning peace. Maybe that was the balance we both needed. The summer rolled on, and my publisher asked me to do another project, a guidebook for women rebuilding their lives after 60. I laughed and said, "Guess I'm the poster child for late bloomers." They sent me an advance big enough to buy a small house. Paddy helped me find a little cottage a few blocks from the water, white shutters and a porch swing. When I moved in, Sandy brought a bottle of champagne and said, "To Martha, who finally came home to herself." I spent the next few months riding in the mornings and walking on the beach in the evenings. The guilt that used to cling to me like wet clothes had finally dried off. Sometimes I'd glance at that photo of baby Lisa on my nightstand and whisper, "We're okay." Then one day, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a drawing from the twins, two stick figures holding hands with a gray-haired woman. The caption read, "Grandma at the beach." There was a note in Lisa's handwriting. They asked to send this. "We're proud of you. Love, L." My heart melted. I sat there clutching that piece of paper like it was gold. I didn't rush to call. I just let the warmth settle in. Forgiveness wasn't a phone call anymore. It was quiet understanding. A few months later, my publisher told me the first book had sold over 100,000 copies. They wanted me to go on a small speaking tour. I hesitated, then remembered what Sandy always said, "Say yes to the good stuff." So I did. I traveled from church halls in Georgia to libraries in Maine, telling rooms full of women that it's never too late to start over. Some cried, some laughed, some hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. In every face, I saw a little piece of my old self. Tired, hopeful, brave. During one stop in Nashville, after the talk ended, a woman about Lisa's age came up to me. Her eyes were red. "I called my mom toxic last year," she said quietly. "After reading your book, I realized how cruel that was. I drove 6 hours to tell her I'm sorry." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you for saving us." I hugged her and whispered, "Go home. Tell her she's enough." As she walked away, I felt something inside me heal a little more. Maybe that was my real purpose. Not revenge or fame, but helping other families find the words I couldn't for so long. When the tour ended, I came back to my little cottage, tired but content. The town welcomed me with open arms again. That night, I sat on my porch swing with a cup of tea, the ocean humming nearby, and thought about how different life looked now. A year ago, I was begging for a daughter's love. Now I had hundreds of strangers thanking me for reminding them to love themselves. Still, there was one thing left unsettled. I hadn't seen Lisa in person since that birthday. Letters and calls came and went, but we'd never sat face to face. I didn't know if that would ever happen. I told myself I was fine either way, but deep down, I knew seeing her again would close a circle. It was early autumn when the letter came. No email, no text, just an envelope with my name handwritten in blue ink. I knew that handwriting instantly. Lisa's, neat and careful, like she used to write when she was a little girl doing homework at the kitchen table. I held it for a minute, feeling my heartbeat in my fingertips, then finally opened it. Inside was a short note and 2 photos. The note said, "Mom, we're coming to Florida next week. The boys want to see you. I'd love to see you too, if you'll have us." The first picture was of the twins in their new school uniforms, grinning with missing teeth. The second was of Lisa, standing by a small rental house with sunlight on her face. She looked older, but softer somehow, like the fight had finally left her eyes. I read the letter 3 times, then set it down and stared out the window. My first thought was fear. What if seeing her reopened everything? What if all the healing I'd done just cracked wide open again? But then I remembered something Sandy once told me. Peace isn't about forgetting. It's about not bleeding when you remember. So I picked up my phone and typed, "I'd love that. The boys can stay here. There's plenty of room." A week later, I stood by the pier watching a silver SUV pull into the parking lot. The door opened, and there she was. Lisa, my baby girl, wearing jeans and a plain white shirt, no makeup, no armor. The twins jumped out and ran straight to me yelling, "Grandma!" I bent down, hugged them so tight I thought my heart would burst. They smelled like sunscreen and childhood. Lisa walked toward me slowly, clutching her bag, her face trembling somewhere between guilt and hope. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Hey, Mom." I smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." We stood there awkwardly for a few seconds, the sound of the waves filling the space between us. Then I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms. She didn't resist. She just melted into me, like she used to when she scraped her knee as a kid. She started to cry, soft little sobs that soaked through my shirt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For saying those things. For pushing you away." I stroked her hair, my own tears falling into it. "Sure," I said. "We both made mistakes. We were both hurting." She pulled back and looked at me, eyes red and raw. "I didn't realize how much I depended on you until you were gone," she said. "You were right to stop saving me. It forced me to grow up." We spent the rest of that afternoon on the beach, just talking. No accusations, no therapy words, just honesty. She told me how hard the past year had been, losing the house, working long hours, learning how to budget without help. "I hated you for not fixing it," she said. "But I get it now. I needed to fix myself." I told her how I'd learned to breathe again, how the ocean and the cafe and my new friends had saved me. She laughed through tears and said, "You're kind of famous now, you know." I shrugged. "Yeah, but I still burn toast." We both laughed, and it felt like something heavy inside me finally loosened. The boys ran up with seashells and dumped them into my lap. "Grandma, look. This one's shaped like a heart." I smiled. "That means good luck," I said. Lisa looked at the shell, then at me. "Maybe it means healing," she whispered. That evening, I cooked dinner for them at my cottage. Nothing fancy, just fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and sweet tea. The house filled with the smell of comfort and forgiveness. The boys set the table, arguing about who got the bigger drumstick, and Lisa wandered through the rooms, touching my paintings and framed photos. She stopped at one picture, me holding her as a baby. "You kept this," she said softly. "Of course," I told her. That was the best day of my life. After dinner, we sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed into the water. The twins fell asleep on the swing, their little heads resting on each other's shoulders. Lisa turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "When I called you toxic, did you hate me?" I shook my head slowly. "No. I hated the way it made me feel, but not you. You were drowning, and you thought pushing me under would help you breathe. I just had to stop letting you." She looked down, wiping her eyes. "I wish I'd understood sooner. We both learned late," I said. "But at least we learned." When they left the next morning, the boys promised to visit again soon. Lisa hugged me for a long time before getting in the car. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said. "You found yourself." I smiled. "And you found your strength. Guess we're both doing okay." She nodded, then whispered, "I love you." "I love you too, baby girl," I said. And this time, it didn't hurt to say it. It felt peaceful, like closing a book you'd read too many times and finally understood. After they drove away, I stood by the water for a long while. The gulls were loud, the tide high, the sun warm on my skin. I thought about all the versions of myself that had lived before this moment. The young mother with no time for dreams, the widow who lost her light, the woman called toxic who drove away crying with a birthday cake on her lap. They were all still inside me, but they'd finally stopped fighting. A few months later, my second book came out, Strong at 70. It wasn't about pain this time, it was about joy. The dedication read, "For my daughter Lisa, who taught me that love with boundaries can still be love." The publisher sent me on another tour, but this time I took a little company. Lisa and the twins joined me for one stop in Dallas. Standing on that stage together, I realized how far we'd come. She looked at me, smiling, and said quietly, "We're a work in progress, huh?" I laughed. "Aren't we all?" When the event ended, a woman from the audience approached me and said, "You make me believe it's never too late to start again." I told her, "It's never too late, honey. Not even when you think it is." That night, back at the hotel, Lisa and I shared a quiet dinner. The twins were asleep upstairs. She raised a glass of iced tea and said, "To starting over." I clinked mine against hers. "To learning to love without losing yourself." We smiled, and for the first time in forever, it didn't feel like a fragile truce. It felt real. Months passed. Seasons changed. I went back home to Cedar Harbor, back to my porch, my paints, my peace. Sometimes Lisa called, sometimes she didn't. Sometimes we saw each other, sometimes we didn't. But it didn't hurt anymore. Love didn't need to be constant to be real. It just needed to be kind. One evening, I sat on the beach as the sun dipped low, the sky turning gold. A little girl nearby was building a sandcastle with her mom. She looked up and asked, "Grandma, are you gonna help us?" I laughed and said, "Sure, sweetheart." Her mom smiled and said, "She just calls everyone Grandma. She says it means someone nice." I helped them stack sand and seashells, and when they finished, the little girl hugged me around the waist and ran off. I looked at the small castle and smiled to myself. That's when I realized the truth I'd been searching for all along. Motherhood isn't just about who you raise, it's about who you become. And sometimes, losing everything you thought defined you is the only way to find who you really are. As the tide crept in and the waves kissed the edges of that little castle, I whispered, "I'm okay now." The water shimmered like it was answering back. And for the first time in my 72 years on this earth, I believed it.